Welcome back to Laravel Podcast Season 7. I'm your host, Matt Stauffer, CEO of Titan, and in this season, I'll be joined every episode by a member of the Laravel team. Today, I'm talking to I want to say my old friend, but it always makes it sound like you're old. My friend for many years, Chris Fidao, a team lead for infrastructure of cloud at Laravel. Chris, can you say hi and share a little bit about what you do at Laravel?
Yeah, hi. Like you said, I'm Chris. I am on the cloud team at Laravel. So that means I and the team, of course, have built up the cloud product. And right now, over time, I've transitioned, we were talking about this earlier, we transitioned from basically being an infrastructure engineer, doing Terraform, building infrastructure, all that fun stuff. And now I'm the team lead for the infrastructure cloud team. I'm going to say team a million times. Which means I'm effectively an engineering manager now. So my day-to-day now is managing people instead of actually doing the code. Although, it's a little of everything.
I have a lot of questions for you about that. But before I get to those questions about what you do day-to-day, I want to know more about what the story was for you coming to Laravel. So people might not know, what your history with the Laravel framework and everything like that looks like prior to actually having a job at Laravel. And also, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you did when you first joined here, and then we can kind of get into your job today. So first of all, what was your introduction to Laravel, the framework, and what was that kind of journey like?
Yeah, oh my God. Okay, so one of my first jobs was at a marketing agency, and we did content management systems, right? So that was, in our case, it was all PHP, right? So some WordPress, but actually mostly everything. It skipped. We had an era of Drupal, Joomla. Am I saying it right anymore?
Really? Didn't y'all do EE as well?
WordPress,
or did I make that up?
A lot of expression engine. That was very heavy. And I didn't get to others because then we did some custom development. And guess what you do when you go to custom development in PHP? You use a framework. So CodeIgniter, eventually Laravel. And by the time Laravel came around, it was Laravel 4, I think I jumped on, or 3. Must have been 4, though, I feel like. Something like that. Anyway, so around that era, I started learning Laravel, and it was amazing, right? CodeIgniter was great, but Laravel just had all the tools that you want, and in a way that made a little more sense than CodeIgniter to me at the time. So then I was all in on Laravel, and was young, had no kids, right? So then I start blogging, write a book, making videos, do all the things you do when you have time.
Not have kids.
And that was all fun and great. Which led me to talking to Ian Landsman, who at that time employed Taylor Atwell, right, maker of Laravel. And I ended up working at Userscape with them. So then I was working with Taylor and Eric Barnes and all that kind of fun people, kind of like, Laravel ecosystem people, right? And then I was working with them, which was great. So obviously Laravel heavy there. Actually, the product we worked on was older, preceded frameworks even. So Laravel got shoved in there eventually, but that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's where I came with Laravel, and
but
from
real
there
quick,
it's
though,
just
you're not just an average person blogging about Laravel at that time. You had a little bit of a bent, which actually kind of leads into you being on the infrastructure team. So if somebody's not familiar with your book, your blog, what if you were the something guy in the Laravel world, talk about kind of what your focus was on.
Okay, that's a good point, because eventually I started the Servers for Hackers newsletter, right? And that is all about servers for programmers, basically. Hackers being programmers, not illegal or whatever, despite the occasional email I get of people requesting me, asking me how to hack something. I don't actually know.
Exactly.
So that started as a newsletter. Got a bunch of people, and then it turned into a website, and I made a bunch of video courses and that kind of stuff. But the theme was always how to do server stuff if you're a PHP developer and don't necessarily, you're not a sysadmin, you're just a programmer, quote in quotes. And that was the bent there. So over time, I became known in the Laravel community at some phase of Laravel history as the server guy. I don't know if that's true anymore. I don't publish a lot of public stuff anymore. So any younger people probably have no idea who I am. But that was the bent. So eventually Laravel Cloud came along. By then I'm no longer at Userscape. I was working at Fly.io. Laravel got funding, all that fun stuff. They were starting to make cloud, and Taylor, messaged me and was like, "You'd be interested in starting on Laravel Cloud and doing infrastructure?" And of course, the mothership policy, you don't say no.
Yeah. Okay. So at that point, you are working at Fly, and Fly's infrastructure as well, but I feel like you were more content there. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. That was an interesting pit stop in my career in that I wasn't directly doing server stuff anymore. I was kind of like evangelizing Laravel for Fly.io, making it on the frameworks team, they called it. So they had different framework people, right? Rails, Laravel, whatever else, whatever node, whatever JavaScript is. And then that job ended up being mostly content, but then also some programming, but not core infrastructure engineering. So I wasn't on the team like running servers, running Firecracker virtual machines and all the fancy stuff they did.
Yeah. Did you do infrastructure at HelpSpot?
Yeah. Because we made the product, I'm going to call it a product, HelpSpot Cloud. And that was basically hosting HelpSpot, because traditionally it was a self-hosted product for years and years and years. And then
I'd always assumed that you're the one who was the big part of that, but I never actually knew if that was technically your job.
Right. Because by then I had done the servers hacker stuff also. So like Ian, who owns Userscape, was, knew I knew server stuff, and that's how that started. So we were not doing anything fancy there either. That was like a few hundred, which must sound fancy, but isn't, just EC2 servers, just regular virtual machines in AWS, and each customer got their own virtual machine. So we had that kind of model. So the game there is just managing, this customer needs an update. So push the button to update and then make the process that does the update to the version of HelpSpot they're on, and that kind of fun stuff.
Got it. Okay. So you ended up at Laravel working as an infrastructure engineer originally on the team. And before we move into the kind of engineering role that you're in right now, what kind of stuff were you working on at the beginning there? Because we haven't actually gotten to talk a ton about what is actually running in the background behind Cloud. I've had somebody drop a one sentence version of it when I was introducing Cloud, but what were you getting deep into, and what was it like getting deep into something when you had kind of done more like a content direction for the last few years at Fly?
Yeah, that was fun. I think the short answer there is that I had a lot of energy to get back into real infrastructure stuff instead of just content. Because the content stuff, fun, is something I always like to do, which is why I switched jobs to Fly. But it ended up being, I actually need both in my life. Some content and some development, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Which makes sense, because you do the development and then you have stuff to write about, which now I'm too busy to actually even do that. But still happily chugging along with being able to do some, it's changed now, but doing a lot of programming and that kind of thing. And then also learning new roles. For me, being an engineering manager is like a new thing. But anyway, to get back to your actual question, what was I doing in those early days is figuring out how to build Cloud, because I came in specifically to help build Cloud and that kind of stuff. So I was pretty early after funding. So even before Andre started, I think by then he had confirmed he was joining Laravel, but hadn't even started yet. So Tom, the CEO, was there, then me, and then Andre started. So I was there really early, right after funding, and then figuring out how we're going to do stuff. So I got to help work with Joe on how to, Joe Dixon, on how to figure out what we're going to do with Cloud. At first, we were looking at Vercel's model of using serverless, Lambda, and we ended up not doing that for just a bunch of reasons. We can get into that if it's interesting. But we ditched that, and then we were like, okay, so if we're going to use not serverless, then we're doing servers, and then what do we do to manage servers? Kind of the next obvious thing is Kubernetes. Right. Just because it's so, it has a huge ecosystem. Basically because it has a huge ecosystem. There's nothing it can't do effectively. And it helps with our model of, how many workloads can we put into a server reliably and all that kind of fun stuff. Kubernetes just has answers to that kind of stuff, right? So Kubernetes, it runs containers. And it answers the question of, if I have a crap load of servers, how do I figure out what server to put a workload on and, manage putting a workload there and run it and connect it to the internet and all that stuff. It just answers those questions for you. So that becomes the next logical thing to do if you're going to do a server full solution to run workloads. So
is Kubernetes I have toyed with it in the past enough to know that it's not my place. I'm there are people at Titan who know it better than I do, but I don't. In Kubernetes, is it purely code configuration, or is there a dashboard somewhere that you're interacting with?
There's no dashboard unless you install one, which those exist. And even then, the dashboards usually have some kind of functionality that you're looking for. So
got it.
We use one called Argo CD, and it basically GitOps' stuff inside of a Kubernetes cluster. And in fact, you can actually attach other clusters to it and manage those other Kubernetes clusters from this one thing. So that gives you a UI that you can click around in and see what's running in any particular cluster and its status and look at its logs and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So essentially, no, it's mostly YAML. It's all YAML, all the way down. And
that's what I have experience with. But I was like, I haven't gone like to your level of Kubernetes. So I was just like, is there a world that I don't know about other than just the YAML and YAML and YAML? Okay, got it.
There's a fun thing where we do, and it's called an operator, and you can program against Kubernetes API. And essentially the way to think about that is that you're not actually generating YAML at all. You're actually making API calls to the Kubernetes API. But you can think about it as code that generates YAML that tells Kubernetes what to do. Because the YAML in the end is getting converted to like something that makes API calls anyway.
Got it. Okay.
And in this way, you get to programmatically interact with Kubernetes stuff. So you can do fancier things than, as you can imagine with code, right? So like YAML can tell Kubernetes to do something, like spin up this container, run it, blah, blah, blah. Code can be more interactive and say, this is the status of the world, do this task. Like an example of that is when you deploy an application on cloud, you might want to run a task right before the code is released. So that might be like a migrate command, right? PHP artisan migrate, something like that. We can do that because we have this operator set up and it knows how to orchestrate everything to, like, for example, have your newest deployment running, run PHP artisan migrate, but if it fails, roll back to your previous version of your code.
Okay, yeah. Where building something like that in YAML would be basically impossible.
Yeah. I was about to say, would it be impossible? Probably.
Yeah. If it was not impossible, it was yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, that's really cool. You had mentioned a minute ago that we can go into that, if we want. I would love to learn more about this kind of like serverless. It feels like serverless had its heyday, and then it's on its way out of its heyday. And obviously, you guys weren't chasing what's popular when you made the decision. Well, if serverless was the right decision for cloud, you would have done it. But it is curious to me that part of the decline is people just seeing a lot of the shortcomings of serverless. So I'm curious, like, is an easy way for you to share with normies kind of like what kind of problems you did run into as you guys were considering serverless?
Yeah, no problems, because we didn't even get as far as deciding to use it and try it out. Well, we do know problems because we have Vapor as an example. And the biggest problem is visibility into what's going on into serverless is hard, just by nature of serverless. You can't SSH into anything and see what's up. But just by nature of how they built Lambda, also the 15-minute limit of running a Lambda is pretty killer, depending on your queue jobs and that kind of stuff. So AWS has their specific use cases if they want people to use Lambda for, and things that take longer than 15 minutes is not one of those use cases.
Not on that list.
Unless you do fancy things like step functions or whatever. You can chunk jobs into different whatever. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Doesn't work for Laravel as easily. So that's one factor, just one. Other factor, it's expensive. It's like the most expensive way to run compute in a public cloud, and that's AWS especially. A fun thing we learned, we actually got access to, we got to talk to a bunch of people in AWS thanks to being like an enterprise account, that kind of thing. So one of the fun things I learned is that one of the reasons Lambda is so expensive is because it has to burst to so much capacity necessarily. Like some customers have a lot of bursty traffic and just like all of a sudden tens of thousands of micro virtual machines have to spin up. It's servers behind the scene, right? So AWS has to have all of these servers just ready and available to run these little micro virtual machines on. Therefore, Lambda is expensive because they have to pay for all those servers to actually be running all the time. Like the power consumption of having all these servers, just whatever. So they have to allocate all these like huge servers to the Lambda service. Therefore, we pay a lot of money because, for the benefit of having quote unquote unlimited, bursting at any point. But anyway, so it's expensive. So that's another factor. It's expensive to us. We have to provide a service to other people. We have to mark it up. So there's profit to be made. Therefore, it's not the best way to go because it's so expensive. And then we were looking at Vercel, but Vercel is primarily front end stuff. So a lot of caching can be in play, and therefore they're like serverless functions, or whatever, get hit less than something in PHP where every request basically has some server component. So like every request will have a server component, hit Lambda, run Lambda, cost and expense. Whereas something like Vercel probably has a lot less of that because they can get cached so aggressively that a lot of stuff is like front end JavaScript stuff running that can be cached and returned and not necessarily hit a Lambda behind the scenes. I don't know if that's the reality anymore with other features, but that's one of the reasons why we turned away from it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I know that this is kind of what you did in the past, so thank you for kind of being willing to kind of dive down this road a little bit. So at some point you made a transition. Did you go straight from that level of kind of engineer to where you are today, or was there an intermediary phase?
To where I am today, like being an
In terms of
engineering
your role?
manager.
Yeah.
I guess there was. So what I did is that I just pretended I was just kind of this position the whole time. So in the Aaron Francis point of view, if you can just do things, I was first. And so like we brought on more people pretty quickly, because as you can imagine, you need a lot of people to do this type of thing. And the other people were and are great and have a lot of expertise, in a lot of cases, a lot more expertise than me. So it made sense for me to kind of like start organizing the team and kind of being that person. As well as having a lot of IC work, individual contributor work, like actually programming, whatever. So there was a transition period in that I kind of like play acted the part that I wanted to be of the engineering manager. And then eventually, it's like 70-30, 60-40, the split changes. Then eventually I'm basically like a 95% engineering manager now. And the title became official also like, I don't know, a year ago.
Okay. So had you ever managed a team before?
Yes, but not as directly and officially as this. More like in unofficial capacities. So I had some experience there, but not in this like real capacity.
So like what was the learning process like? Like, did you just
I'm still going? Was it still learning?
Yeah. What is the learning process like? Like, did you say, oh, well, I need to go in a very concerted and intentional learning process where I'm going to go read books, watch videos? Or was it sort of more just like, yeah, just try it and figure out what to do and ask a friend for help?
That I like have touched, but like how to be an engineering manager. But I should have probably read it, but I did not. But the process was kind of obvious too, because and this is like the benefit of just being kind of early in the process. I just kind of like saw all the steps. I saw new people come in, like product managers come in, different people on the team who are not on cloud specifically, but affect cloud. So like just other people coming to the team, right? So I have I had all this context, so it just makes sense for me to just kind of know what's going on, see what's happening, keep up with everything. And therefore be like relay it to the team of like how things need to get done. I'm not even sure what I'm trying to say. I'm kind of losing track of what I'm saying here. But like in terms of being an engineering manager, right? It's like a very different job from programming. It has a totally different skill set. But I think that was an point in my life where I was kind of ready to do that. And I kind of knew that going in. So I kind of twisted my expectations it's the wrong word, changed my expectations of what I was going to be doing along the way. And then I also had all the context of like what was going on, the history of everything, so I can relate that to people and try to like basically effectively communicate like why decisions were being made to, other people on the team of, I don't know, I guess I'll just throw out an example. So one example is that like we have to be very conscientious of cost, because every decision, not every, but many decisions we make might include or might increase our cost per customer's workload. And that's different from a lot of people coming in from other places where like maybe they have a product they're working on, or maybe they're like a platform engineer who make an internal development tool. And it's like the cost per developer isn't like a big deal, but like we have to charge for our product. Therefore, if we do some kind of infrastructure addition that has a definite cost per customer workload that runs, at scale, that makes a huge amount of cost. And then we either have to charge a customer for it or figure out a way to like, change that. So like those kind of mindset shifts are something that like I help people along with when we're, just as a manager, I guess. Yeah.
Do you have the ability to, like run a workload, or what was it? Do you call it customer workload? Is that the phrase?
That's the way I use. Yeah, that's the phrase.
So if somebody does a pull request and they change code configurations, stuff like that, do you have the ability to spin up like a sample workload and say, oh, it's going to be this more expensive? Or do you have to kind of like run that stuff intuitively through your brain saying, I think that's going to do this, and then we have to now go do some tests?
Okay, so something that would be not intuitive that could increase would be something that uses more bandwidth than you might expect, because AWS charges for bandwidth in all sorts of ways. So that's one way that it's not easy to like know it's going to cost. But like other things are easy. Like we run MySQL instances for people that also uses Kubernetes, so that's in a container. To monitor MySQL, you often use like this thing called like a metrics exporter. So it reads MySQL, does a bunch of queries, and then exports metrics to some other monitoring system so that we can see how many queries per second are happening, or whatever. one model of that is to attach a metrics exporter, a thing monitoring your MySQL instance, to every single MySQL instance. Therefore, you have this extra sliver of compute running per MySQL instance.
Yes.
Therefore, you're going to need more servers in aggregate because, more costs, more compute's being used. So like an alternative to that is to run very few of those exporters, but each one monitors multiple servers.
Okay, that makes sense. You need to know things that I don't know. So I'm grateful you're the one doing that, not me. So
the team.
You mentioned,
now I'm managing a team. So like people are doing stuff. Not necessarily.
Y'all are
sometimes
doing things that I'm not.
Right.
And speaking of that, that's actually my next question. How much coding work are you doing at this point in your career?
I am at a point where when I am doing IC work, it's more of a failure than a success because it means that there's time pressure or something, some project where people are loaded up with work and like, I might do that to try to offload some work for someone to like get something done. Or again, because I like kind of was there from the beginning, there's like some stuff that I know that's not intuitive to other people. So like, I just kind of like end up helping out with that kind of thing. But from that point of view, like it really should be almost none, except for things I want to do or side projects I'm investigating a strategy we might employ. But it still happens because just the nature of work. There's a lot of work to do, and limited time, limited people, but unlimited scope of work to potentially do, right? So, so there's lots of stuff going on, and sometimes I end up, doing actual code, which of course I enjoy. So not a big deal from that point of view, other than the fact that it takes time away from real managerial type work, improving processes or documenting stuff, that kind of thing.
With all love and respect to everybody you've worked for before, because obviously we've already named and we love Ian, and there's other folks you've worked for before that you don't want to disrespect anyway, and I'm not suggesting that, but are there any ways that you as a manager are stepping in and saying, you know what, like this is something I've always wanted, and it not because other people did a bad job or whatever, but you're just like, I as a manager really want to provide this, or I've gotten this at previous places, I want to make sure that I provide it? Or is it more just very instinctive, is sort of like, I think this is what makes sense here? Like, does that make sense as a question?
I think so. One thing I really liked from other jobs was a way to check in on Slack and be like, I did this. And like, everyone can do that. This was specifically at Fly. I think they had a bot where you just like at this bot and say, I did this. And you could do it, multiple times a week, kind of whenever you did a thing. And then in aggregate, like managers or really anyone could see it. They could just see like what a person did, that was really neat and helpful because as a manager, you want to have evidence, sure, of what people have actually done, a history of like the work people have done, and then also a way to see when people are doing a great job and like point to this so you can like say like this person should, get a raise, get a better position, or this person should, it hasn't really happened that much or anything, but like this person needs improvement. Right now we've hired like lots of senior people and that kind of thing. So like everything's good from that point of view. But that kind of thing is what I really wanted. And something like that did happen at Laravel. I advocated for that a bunch. In the end, we resurrected this Beep app that Taylor made years ago.
Really?
And that's like and it turned into like a Slack check-in app. And so that came to be thanks a lot more to Joe Dixon than me, although I was advocating for it behind the scenes. So that kind of thing certainly has been around. I don't know if I have any other great examples though.
Okay. So, my first question was kind of what do you do in a day-to-day from a code basis? But you mentioned kind of like if you're coding, it's somewhat of a failure unless it's a fun thing on the side. So what do you do day-to-day as a manager? How much of your time is spent in meetings versus planning versus whatever else? Like what?
All meetings.
What is it that you do here? Yeah.
Well, what is I do? I don't know anymore, dude. Lots of meetings. For better or worse, there's there's a bunch of meetings, and a lot of it is plan. So we work in 6-week cycles, it's like the oh my god, I want to call it Upwork. That's not right. What's the third? Yeah, Shape Up. Thank you. I think I would know because we do it. So we do the Shape Up thing every 6 weeks. 6 weeks work cycles. We have cool down cycle, that kind of thing. So a lot of management stuff is helping with the product managers, and then Joe and Jeremy and myself, who are kind of like leads of teams. Joe's like the overall tech lead, and then we have Jeremy, who's the lead of like the web app side, and myself, the lead of the infrastructure side, all in cloud. Get together and do a lot of management of what projects are going to be coming up the next cycle, how the projects are going currently, and all that kind of fun stuff. So there's a lot of those type meetings, and there's meetings with partners. There's meetings with potential customers, usually kind of like leaning towards enterprise or large team side of things. There's one-on-ones with, the team as the South, right? And that's the majority of them.
Okay. I've had a lot of different conversations with people about how they do one-on-ones, and I've found that people can... Dogmatic is not the right word, but people can have very strong opinions about what a good one-on-one looks like.
Okay.
And I'd never have thought that my one-on-ones are what they're supposed to be, and I like them, and as far as I know, the people who work for me like them. Do you have any aspects where you're like, a good one-on-one must have this?
No. I hate dogmatic answers, which is for the same reason I was never dogmatic about a single process running in a container, if you happen to know what that means or care. I love to run multiple things in a container. I'm not dogmatic about like meetings, that kind of stuff either. The one-on-ones end up being a combo of things. Sometimes they're work therapy. Sometimes they are what's going on with your project. Sometimes it's like we just completely talk about tech. It's not even the right phone call for that, but we end up doing it because why not? That's the subject that comes in hand. It's really just being in touch with things. Like, do they have issues they need resolving? Something not going the way they want to. It's a great place to get feedback on like some feedback I got is like, we used to have a infrastructure meeting with just all the infrastructure people once a week, and it ended up just being like a round robin of this is what I'm working on. But like people that were like, that kind of sucks. Let's just talk about the things we want to talk about. And we did that, and it's been great because like then a lot of stuff floats to the top that you wouldn't have talked about otherwise, but ended up being really important. So as long as there's a good way for you to communicate with your team where they feel like they can talk about harder things, easy things, whatever with you, like that's kind of how I see a one-on-one being successful.
That's good. I like that. That's how I do it. And so I'm encouraged to hear right? There's two of us. So, so outside of your day-to-day job, and maybe it's something you're doing during your job, but outside of your day-to-day assignments, you mentioned kind of like things you're interested in learning and side projects. Like what outside of learning how to continuing to learn to be a great manager has your attention right now? What are you nerding out about? What are you learning?
It's more tech stuff about how to run stuff within our infrastructure. So things that are not Kubernetes sometimes are fun. I haven't, not that's like an official thing that would ever happen, but like just like Fly had this great system of running micro VMs with Firecracker, and they have a lot of benefits. They also have a lot of harder things, but they have benefits in terms of like how fast they can spin up and that kind of thing. Think Lambda, because Lambda is based on that, right? So you spin up a Lambda in microseconds or milliseconds. Firecracker can do that if we use the system like that too. That's kind of a fun thing to think on, but not necessarily something we like try to implement or anything.
Yeah. But like sometimes learning another system just changes how you think about your current system, right? It gives you new ideas and everything. Yeah.
There's more in the weed things. So remember these operators I was talking about in Kubernetes? Like a lot of the ecosystem is like installing operators that do a task for you. So for example, we are going to manage infrastructure for people. Obviously, we are going to manage like things like RDS databases for customers. And RDS databases is just a service in AWS. So in order to create a database in AWS and RDS, you're just making API calls. So one of the instead of us like making a container, running a container, managing MySQL, make sure it doesn't die, that kind of thing, which is we're also doing as a MySQL service. But some customers might want RDS just for reasons, all the features it has and that kind of thing. So we're going to provide that for customers. So how do we do that? Well, there is an operator called Crossplane, and there's other ones that do this too, but there's an operator you can run in Kubernetes that called Crossplane, and they can actually spin up AWS resources for you. So like one thing is just investigating, do we want to use that and how would we do it and that kind of thing, and implement it and integrate in our systems and make it so our web app can say this customer wants an RDS database, then talk to Crossplane or whatever, then make the RDS database, and then have a communication come back and tell the web app it's done and all that kind of fun stuff.
Is being responsible for in the weeds. Is being responsible for code that spins up people's actual servers that run their actual websites is a lot more stressful than just being responsible for your own code. I feel like you're at multiple levels. Like if I push out a new feature and I make a mistake, like one client may, one user might be like, hey, this PDF wasn't where I want it. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll fix that. Whereas if you guys push out some code and you make a mistake, somebody's entire server is messed up and they're like, hey, my whole app is broken. You like have multiple levels of responsibility. Is that stressful? What does it look like to write code where you have that level of responsibility?
Yeah, that's fun for sure. Definitely adds a level of, I don't know if I want to call it. It is stressful. Stressful is when things break. It's not too stressful to do that, but it does require a lot of thinking and planning, which is, we've hired the right people for that. So it kind of just like happens. But like the real, some of it, so it's all process. It's making a process to make mistakes less likely to happen. Some of it's forced on you by like SOC 2 or other compliance things, which is good because there's forcing function to make you sure you have this process. So for an example, there is that everything that might land in production has to have a review behind it. So that's usually like a GitHub review that, updates a GitHub repository that then is read by something that adjusts itself because it sees the code and the repository has been updated. Git ops, right? So Git changes, something reads that change, applies that change to your infrastructure. And then there's other fun things like we can control changes down to like the region and sometimes down to like the Kubernetes cluster that runs in a region. So you might roll out a change in one region, make sure it's working fine, and then slowly roll it out to other regions, that kind of process too. In addition to having development, staging, production environments, and all kind of fun stuff. So like, all the touch points you have before. And then like infrastructure can have, a lot of it is code. Therefore, a lot of tests can be written. So those test suites for, these operators I keep talking about and all this ancillary kind of software, just kind of like in tooling you make along the way.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with Vishal from Laracon India on Twitter the other day, and he was saying, we've written some very large enterprise applications for government, stuff like that, and it has led me to want to have 100% test coverage and PHP stand level max and stuff like that, because I think that makes me feel more safe. And I was just like, that doesn't make me feel more safe. It just makes me feel like I'm wasting time. But I've got to be transparent that like, while Titan itself has worked on mega massive, enterprise government things, that's not what I was doing, and now I don't write code anymore. So I'm just kind of like, I'm always kind of like poking, and I'm like, is there something that I need to learn here? So like hearing you talk about kind of your workflows, are there any things where you're like, what has really saved our butt here is this thing that I wouldn't have done in a smaller setting? Because you wrote tests before, right? You had a development and staging environment before. Are there any ways of coding? It doesn't have to be about PHP stand or whatever else, but is there any ways of coding or processes that you're like, this is something I didn't need until I got to this level of intensity?
Okay. The answer is not truly, and that's a good thing because it means people listening don't have to worry about it. Like, it's more, it's not different. Yeah. Like things happen at scale. You have new issues at scale. Big example of that is your database. So we've run bad migrations before, and they're not bad migrations. They are migrations that took the database it was a lot harder on the database than we thought because there's huge tables. The tables are very busy. A combination of foreign key constraints being used, which I just freaking hate, but like people love foreign key constraints, but they caused some issues. So some of those issues are when you run migrations, they don't run as smoothly because there's more deadlocks and transaction issues and that kind of stuff. So at scale, you run into those kind of issues, but I don't have a great answer to like, we do this process, but I never did this exact process before because, this scale requires it. There's no like magic or we can do this at scale, but nowhere else type things that at least that we're using. We tend to keep things as simple as possible though. So there could be things that come up on the horizon as we get larger, but really it's like just a lot of testing, and a lot of that testing is either automated or manual, through our environments and that kind of thing. Having a set process, making sure the process is followed. And I mean, writing a lot of tests, honestly, like the web application, the Laravel web application is like, very heavily tested, like extremely to the point of being annoying, which is good overall. The code quality is very good thanks to that. A combination of, test coverage, syntax or style guide, all that kind of stuff, typing, type tests, that kind of fun thing. Infrastructure side, there's like so many projects that it's not all like 100% test coverage. Cause like, there's like one repository in GitHub for the web application. There's like 50 repositories for infrastructure because we just have all these kind of like weird concerns where it doesn't make sense to throw it all into one Git repo.
Yeah, 100%.
It's kind of just the nature of infrastructure. You're just kind of like always doing these smaller things that, have a function and they're all glued together.
Yeah. Infrastructure is not an app. It is a collection of pieces that each have independent responsibilities and may run in different technologies and different environments.
Yep. We write a lot of Golang, for example. I write very little PHP in the 2 years or so I've been at Laravel.
Interesting. I mean, that's not a surprise, but it is a surprise,
Right.
Because you just imagine, you work at Laravel, you write PHP, right? No, not necessarily. You mentioned a second ago that you don't believe, or you are critical of foreign key constraints. If you had your druthers, would they be gone entirely?
So the trade-off with foreign key constraints is that you can apply them to your database, and then you get neat things like being able to cascade delete, right. And you get better data integrity because your database is going to yell at you if you try to like
sort of reference that doesn't actually exist or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. The drawback is that when your database is kind of heavily used, you get more deadlocks and that kind of thing, which like I'm not a DBA, so I can't explain this in the level I want to. Yeah. Which also means anyone who's seeing this or hearing this can be critical of my opinions. That's fine. Just know the people at PlanetScale agree with me, so they know what they're doing. So I don't know.
Lead it right. Yeah.
They're also biased because the technology they use does not like foreign key constraints under the hood. So everything with grains of salt.
Always.
So the trade-off there is that more deadlocks, more issues with transactions, migrations become harder because at scale, quote unquote, which sounds super fancy. There's a lot of stuff happening in the database. Just makes it harder because you run into issues that lock up a database table or something, and things therefore take longer or fail altogether because of transaction deadlock happened too long and therefore it failed and had to roll back or whatever. So what you have to do if you drop foreign key constraints is to code around things. So you have to write more logic to delete stuff because there's no cascade delete. And then you have to be more careful in your code to make sure the data integrity is present, right? Like I deleted this in this table, therefore this stuff in this table also needs to be deleted, and they better. And you don't want to leave dangling data behind. So, you have to code that in instead of just get it from the database.
Yeah, we maintain a web application. I'm going to be as generic as I can so nobody's going to know what I'm talking about. We maintain a web application that was written a decade ago, I think, by a developer who was learning as they went. And the number one problem we've run into in this database is it's this massively complicated application. I'm very impressed with this person being able to build the thing that had so many different views, so many different calls, so many different controllers. But the number one problem we run into is they're like, this page just errors out and we don't know why. And it's because there's data inconsistency where one thing got deleted or renamed or repointed or whatever, and there's 0 foreign keys anywhere in the app. And I'm 100% with you in that something somewhere needs to maintain that data consistency. It's either got to be your database through foreign keys or it's got to be your code. But either way, you can't allow yourself to get a situation where something's referencing an ID that doesn't exist somewhere else. Well, okay, it's going to break. Foreign keys, I think, are nice as a default because you get that logic for free, right? If you just teach someone, like, if you build something that is related to another table, put a foreign key constraint onto the ID of the other table, and then you're good. But I love the idea that just because it's a good default doesn't mean you always need to use it, because the number of times I've been bit by this exact situation that you're talking about where, like, well, I'm trying to delete a thing or I'm trying to migrate a thing or whatever, and just I'm also not a DBA, but I've been bit by foreign key constraints more often than I'd like to admit. So it depends, right? It's just another one of those.
It's one of those things. I think I agree with you. I think start with them and then back out of them as you need to, which isn't necessarily always easy to do, but in general, not too bad. But start with them. They're good default. They let you write less code in theory, and then you should get back out of them if you hit scaling issues. So fine.
So I know we're kind of nearing the end of the time that we have allotted. As always, I can talk to you for hours, but I'm trying to kind of keep it in this one particular spot. So I was asking you what you're kind of interested in. You named a few, and I interrupted you because I was really fascinated by one. Were there any more aspects of like what you're learning or what you're kind of playing around with that you wanted to share that I interrupted, or do you feel like you got to what's on your mind?
I don't have anything else top of mind that'd be fun to talk about. I'm sure there's something. I just can't think of it.
And then is there anything else you hope we get a chance to talk about today?
Man, I'm going to have a tough time thinking of things. There's a lot going on.
Totally fine.
Everything's very busy.
Yes.
Which actually been fun because I've been off social media a lot because I'm just so busy. I don't have time to think about it. And I feel like my mental health is just way better because of it. There's a meta topic about being busy.
No, 100%. My wife Amani, she's like, she has to do social media for work, and when she's choosing only to do it for work and not for personal, she's like, oh, this is drastically better. I kind of wish I didn't have to do it for work. So
you
and I have several friends who've been like, I just quit social media and then my life was better. Turns out it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So love it. Well, Chris, You're amazing as always. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thanks for sharing all these things. We run into things I was not expecting. So thanks for kind of teaching us all this cool stuff.
All right, yeah, happy to. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And for the rest of you, we will see you all next time.